Hi, everyone, and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where three Pro Tools experts demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put to the community in Avid's official Facebook support forum. In this episode, we're going to continue our discussion on compressors from last week. And in this week's episode, we're talking about sidechains. Andy is going to drive. Anders and myself, Dave, are just along for the ride. Take it away, Andy.
Yeah, I'm in the back seat on this one.
What are you doing there in the back seat?
Are we there yet?
Are we there?
Are we there yet?
Oh dear! Don't make me turn around. So this kind of follows on what we talked about in the previous episode. We talked about attack and release times, two kind of misunderstood and often miscommunicated, to be honest, from the teaching community. Features that can really make a compressor do what you want it to do. Now, if we're talking about using language incorrectly, attack and release time is one thing, but we generally use the term sidechain incorrectly. Okay, so when we talk about sidechaining, Dave, what does sidechaining mean to you in the normal vernacular?
So back in the old days, before I didn't know anything, we would refer to as sidechaining as triggering a compressor from an external source. As in a verb to sidechain. More recently, my answer's been updated. I tend to think of it as a control source. It's a control feed.
That's right. So typically speaking, when somebody says I'm sidechaining, they're talking about, as Dave said, taking the signal of a different track to control the compressor on the track that you're in, right? So you've got a kick drum or dialogue, or there's a lot of different reasons why you might use another track's signal to control a track's compressor. That is using the sidechain, but what it's doing is something specifically using something called a key input. Okay, the sidechain is still there. So let's talk about sidechains, because there's a lot of things that you can do with sidechaining that a lot of people are unaware of. And here, just like attack and release times, if you understand how it works, you can get your compressor to do exactly what you want it to do. All right. So
sorry for interrupting, Andy, and also finally, thoroughly explain the concept. What is a sidechain? Because all compressors have one, even though you're not triggering it from a different track, right?
So, and before we jump in, your access to the sidechain varies from plugin to plugin. Just like Dave said on last week's show, your access to tweaking attack and release times, it varies. On software, you generally have a lot of control. On some hardware devices, you don't have much control at all. You've got what's built in. Same kind of thing when we're talking about plugins that were always just plugins and emulations of hardware devices. So your access to the sidechain can vary, but the sidechain is always there. So let's take a quick look at signal flow when you're using a compressor. Okay, so here we have basically the signal flow chart of a compressor. So you've got the input of the compressor, the signal coming in, and that's the signal on that track. So if you've got a dialogue track or a reverb track or whatever, it's that signal goes into the compressor's input. Then that signal goes down to what's called the attenuator. And the attenuator does nothing more than bring the gain down. It doesn't do anything else. When it's told to bring the gain down, it brings it down by how much? And that's controlled by something else. That something else is called the sidechain. And the sidechain controls what the attenuator does. When you change the parameters, things like threshold, ratio, attack, release, knee, all those kind of things, you're not changing the signal going to the attenuator. You're changing the sidechain. You're changing how the sidechain is going to control the attenuator. The attenuator then makes your appropriate level changes, and then it goes to the output of the compressor. Ask me questions.
No, it's all clear to me. It's a perfectly good example there. So basically, it measures a stream of the signal that controls how much compression you get, and that thing is called the sidechain.
That's right. And this is a component of all compressors, hardware, software, any compressor you can think of has a sidechain, and that sidechain is controlling the attenuator. Again, I'm repeating myself. Now, let's go into some specifics. The same diagram, but with the sidechain controls that you would find in the Dyne 3 compressor limiter. And with some compressors, you have the ability to control what the sidechain hears. If you take a look, you've got a high frequency filter, and you can have that in or out. Right now, it's not in. You've got a low frequency filter. You can click that in or out. I know a lot of people who never touch it. And it's a shame because there's so much great stuff you can do with those two things alone, regardless of whether you're using a key input.
And it's exactly the same for gates and expanders, isn't it? In that you can have the gates trigger off a specific frequency.
That's exactly right. So you've got pretty basic control, but hey, you have some control, which is better than a lot of compressors out there, right? When we talk about sidechaining in the common vernacular, we're actually talking about using a key input. And you can see right up here in the sidechain controls, there's a little button that looks like a key. When that button is lit up, the signal that goes to the sidechain is coming not from the track that the compressor's on, coming from another source. And we're going to put that aside for now, because I really want to take a look at using the sidechain alone without a key input. First of all, I'm going to ask a question to you guys. The signal that goes to the sidechain, is it mono or is it stereo?
This is a great question because thanks, Andy, by the way, for asking this question just before the show. So I've had a little bit of time of think, but you didn't give me the answer before. I mean, if you're speaking, if you got the stereo signal, what is used as a sidechain? And I'm not 100% sure, but it would probably be, I think it's a stereo sum. It's the sum of the stereo signal, a mono signal, I would think. The summed stereo.
Think as well.
It's a good guess. So I've got a stereo track, and that stereo track has a signal on the left side only. And we've got another stereo track with the signal on the right side only. I'll take the dynamic 3 and I'll make that active. There we go. And you'll see here, if I hit play, you can see a signal comes right up and it stays. That's not surprising, right? So it's a minus 20 dB signal, your normal reference sine wave, right? And we're hitting at minus 20. This shouldn't be too surprising. Now, I'm going to go to the right side only. Same thing. And you'll see here, when I hit this, it's hitting minus 20. And you can see here, I've got a minus 20. Now, some doubt might be creeping in.
Okay, okay. My doubt is it's probably not a perfectly summed signal, but it's compensated for your sorry, I'm forgetting the word here, for your pan law. Yeah, sorry.
It's a good guess, right? Now, here's the thing. Let me ask a quick question. Do you want a stereo signal, two different streams controlling the sidechain?
Really, really good question. I mean, if you've got the stereo signal, you obviously don't want different compression on the left and the right side, because it would be weird, and you don't want the ones. If you've got one side that controls the other all the time, I mean, maybe you would end up with the wrong signal.
There's only one attenuator on a stereo compressor. And the reason for this is, as Anders said, you don't typically want to have different compression happening on the left and right side, because your stereo image would shake around, right? It would probably do things that you don't want it to do. If you really want to have different compression on the left and right side, what you probably want to do is have a multi-mono plugin. Okay, that's a different and untraditional use of a compressor. So traditionally, you have one sidechain. That one sidechain takes one audio signal into account when it controls the attenuator. And you can see here, in this case, it took the left side only, minus 20 dB. In this case, it took the right side only, minus 20 dB, right? And so now I've got this interesting little guy that I mocked up. I have different levels. This is minus 20, this is minus 30, this is minus 40, right? So 3 different levels. At any given time, I set it up so that the loudest level is minus 20.
Is it like a VCA? The loudest of the two have priority?
You just nailed it. You got it.
The signal will never exceed minus 20 if I'm correct here.
Look at it go. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, so it's not using the sum, it's using the loudest signal at any given time.
So in that case, it's very similar, as you said, Anders, to the metering on a VCA.
Now that you told me the answer, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it would be weird if you had one signal on the left side and that would be this loud and the other side would be this loud, and it would add them together to create more compression. It makes total sense the way it is.
The exact same kind of situation going on with the Pro Compressor. Let's take a look at 1176. Same exactly. Here's a channel. So these are all the plugins that we used when we were talking about attack and release times.
And of course, this is the only way that it could work.
Exactly right.
So thanks for putting this to my attention. I've never given this much thought, but fantastic. Thank you, Andy.
You can see the meters. These are the meters for input and output. But you can see here in the gain reduction that it's just doing its thing based upon a constant signal. And that constant signal is coming from sample by sample, the loudest signal that hits the sidechain. We normally use the term sidechaining, as I said already a couple times. We're talking about using a key input, but let's forego that, because there's certainly enough stuff on YouTube about using key inputs to get that pumping sound on a compressor. Let's just talk about using the sidechain on its own. And I think this is stuff that not a lot of people delve into. I think experienced mixers, once they understand the concept, never get out of it. They always are going to use their control over the sidechain whenever they have it. But if you don't know how to use it, sometimes you're not going to get the result that you want, and it gets frustrating. So let's take a look in Pro Tools one more time. I've got here two different tracks. I've got a kick sample, and this kick is doing its thing. And what I've done, just to make things a little bit easier, is I've put a low pass filter set to around a little bit over 200 hertz, right? Just to cut out any high frequencies. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a second. Then I've got a new instrument, which I'm actually kind of liking. Have you guys messed around with PlayCell?
No, I haven't.
This is a new virtual instrument that was released in Pro Tools 2023.3. And if you haven't used it, it's actually got a few really useful sounds in it. It's easy, it's basic, it doesn't have the greatest amount of flexibility, but as far as built-in sounds, it's got some very useful stuff in it. And what I've done is I've just got a pad here, and we'll just take a listen.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's not bad at all.
Love that sound.
Yeah, it's got good sounds in it. Here's one of them, right? And what I've done, again, just to make things a little easier, for example, is I've taken a bit of a high-pass filter just so that we have some frequency gap between the kick and the pad. Both of these outputs are going to this aux track. So I'm basically creating a subgroup, and you'll see why in just a second. And I've got a compressor. We'll start out with our good friend, the Dynamic 3 compressor and limiter. And if I take a listen to this, how can I get my compressor to not pump? I'm a mastering engineer. I want to put a good, smooth compressor on my mix, and I want it to be fairly aggressive, but I don't want that pumping. How do I get rid of it? And people will jump through flaming hoops to try and get rid of it. And they'll miss the thing that will solve their problem for us, and that is this sidechain control. I want to get a nice, smooth compression. I don't want the kick drum to control or have any part to play in what the sidechain hears and what the sidechain tells that attenuator to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the high-pass filter, which is going to cut the low frequencies. This little speaker icon allows us to only hear what's coming into the sidechain. And so I'll start off here at the lowest level so you can hear. I hear everything, right? And that's the signal that's going to the sidechain. And if I bring this up, great, I've just done it. It's as easy as that. I'll keep the filter in, but I'll take out the listen, and you'll hear. I can bring my threshold down. It's not pumping because the sidechain, which controls the attenuator, can't hear the kick drum. I filtered it out. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Now I could go the other way. I want to get maximum pumpage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my filter. All the sidechain is hearing is the kick. And you can see my gain reduction meter is going crazy here. So let's go ahead. So you have control over what the sidechain hears, even when you're not using a key input. And with the Dynamic 3, you've got control over the high frequencies, the low frequencies. You can see here that I've got the ability to either choose a shelf or a band pass. That's basically it. A lot of people like the Pro compressor. Look at all the control that you have over this one. So you've got different shelves. You can use a notch. You can use a filter. And again, I've got another little blinking speaker icon, which is going to only play out what the sidechain is hearing. Let me change the cue as well. And then when I pop this out, if you want to get kind of a nasty little pump, you could do that. But if you're using this more for just a gentle mastering on your bus and you don't want it to pump specifically, then you might want to do something like this. And you can see the gain reduction meter is a lot less chaotic. Two different ways to work with the sidechain. Both of them are completely valid in different circumstances, but you can only get this kind of performance out of a compressor if you understand the signal flow and understand what your sidechain is really doing.
Great demonstration, Andy. Thank you for this. It certainly got me thinking, and I picked up a couple of really, really cool things today. Thanks you.
We're incredibly grateful. So we'll put a pin in that one. If you got a lot out of today's video, hit a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. If you head over to protoolsanswers.com, you can find out a little bit more about us over there. You can also subscribe to our own inner circle as well. We're a community-funded channel, and our supporters support really keeps the lights on over here, and we really appreciate it incredibly muchly so. And all leaves me to say is thank you very much to Anders.
Thank you.
We should blow a very big kiss to Andy.
My pleasure.
Mwah. And my name's Dave. We will see you in the next episode. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we are out.